The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. It's Hail Varsity Radio Midweek Edition. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. As we are loaded up today, plenty of football to talk. The head man found his way to the Chamber of Commerce. And if they could pass collection plates around, I mean, all NIL worries would end right there. But really cool to hear a little bit of Matt Rhule. We'll have some thoughts on that. Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity going to be with us. He'll join us on air and in the video stream. You want to watch the show, ways for you to do that. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter, at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. Catch us in the afternoon, Coffee and Cream with Damon and Andrew, morning 7 to 10. So Babber's with us in about 15 minutes. We are efforting Mike Schuhart. It is gorgeous out. Shuey's probably teaching someone how to putt or drive because he does that well at Wilderness. So maybe TBA ... Mike Schuhart at 4:40. Evan Bland in hour 2 from the World Herald. Talk some Husker baseball and some recruiting with him in hour 2. Numbers to dial up. Get involved with us at 489-1240, 489-1240, or can always dial up toll free wherever you hear us across the state, 1-800-825-5865. Email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com, and can tweet at us at Schmidt_radio or at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. What do you know today, Elijah? You locked in? Did you get some good communication today? Did you catch any of the Rhule chamber?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce going and passing the plate around, and I've done some quick math before, and I'll bring it up again. If you were to conservatively estimate how many people attended a Nebraska football game last year, you'd probably put it somewhere in the range of, 125 to 150,000 total people that attended a game home or away for Nebraska last season. That's the number I'd put it at, with 90,000 home fans. You know there's going to be people that don't go to every single game. You got people who go visit road games. We'll put it at 125,000 pretty conservatively there. If 125,000 people donated $20 a month to an NIL fund, we are talking $2.5 million per month.
That's enough for a quarterback.
Times 12 months, $30 million a year.
Jeez.
Now, are there 125,000 people out there that are willing to put $20 a month in a collection plate for NIL?
If we get
Probably
Sarah
not.
McLachlan and I can get a sad picture of Gertie the German Shepherd.
Husker football players need your help.
Yeah, just twist it around from the commercial that makes everyone stop. And don't kid yourself, tear up for a second. Animals in need. That's important for sure. Football going to a bowl game is also important. We're not going to arm wrestle with what's more important, and I won't put anybody on the spot there. But, no, we could – Gertie can't really act, but we can get her involved. She always makes an appearance Saturday mornings on camera. Mm-hmm. We'll just see if she'll mind for about 5 seconds, and we'll see if
just a $20 donation per month can save the Husker football program.
Yeah. Well, a couple of guys going on scholarship and one going to Boca. That's the news to start off. And Casey Thompson has landed down in Boca Raton, Florida. Is it Boca Raton? Boca Raton.
Boca Raton, I believe.
Boca Raton. Well, I'd call Uncle Junior from The Sopranos, but I don't think he'd take my call. So Boca's the spot. We'll talk to Charles Thompson tomorrow. That is the knock on wood. We talked to Charles earlier. We'll talk to Charles tomorrow. And if that doesn't happen, forgive me. I've done everything in my power to make that happen. Get his take on things. So Casey is gone. Some of the things touched on and talked about, though, with Nebraska football. They're right around 90, or they're at 90 right now from a scholarship limit. That was divulged by Rhule today at the Chamber of Commerce. You have a couple of guys, Borkacher and John Bullock, both going on scholarship from walk-on to scholarship. That's a great story, and both those guys turned some heads this spring. And Rhule really got into it about building your foundation on rock. There's a Bible verse or two that go along with that, but he's all sorts of excited about where things can go and what things can be in Lincoln. And it's not just winning one year or getting to the mountaintop, but it sounded Belichick and Saban-esque with you don't really rest on your laurels and put your feet up. You just keep going and going and going. And he's been going 1,000 miles per hour since he's been here. Camp schedule-wise, he'll hit a couple of satellite camps, just some news and notes. The 5th and 6th down in Texas. Baylor's camp the 5th. He'll be in Houston June 6th, which is great because you pull a lot of college football coaches. Where do they want to go infiltrate? They want to go to Houston. One of the greatest players ever in Nebraska football history, Broderick Thomas from Houston. Vince Young from around Houston. Vince Young could have been here. We won't get into that story. And, of course, you have some of the great players that rose Colorado football up. Their linebacking core, the Kanavis McGee's and Alfred Williams of the world, both Houston kids.
And Nebraska already has one Houston area kid in their recruiting class. We talked to him a couple weeks ago, Ian Flint from just west of Houston, Texas. So right. Nebraska already diving into the Houston area.
And that is a very fertile area. Ask LSU, ask A&M, ask Alabama with Jalen Hurts. He was a kid that was in Houston that was great. So inroads in Texas are very real. And Nebraska will be down there. So mission and purpose, pretty big. The theme for Matt Rhule today as Nebraska sent to get a little bit of a break with finals, and then guys are supposed to report back May 30th. But Casey is gone. The door is open. Guys have been given an okay to kind of dip their toe in the water, and if they want to come back, they'll come back. So that brings us to the question of Logan Smothers. Is he a guy that can and will return? We don't know. There's not been an announcement yet by Logan other than he has entered the portal, but that does not mean he's not eligible to come back for Nebraska. There is enough room from Rhule's speech today that Nebraska is okay numbers-wise. If they really want to add, they're not active, but if it works out and it's a good fit for each party, they have the ability to do that. And there's been a couple of guys, too, that they've asked to maybe not come back to the program. He didn't specify, but I haven't seen or heard much rumor mill of big loss name out there, not part of the program anymore.
Well, how worried is Matt Rhule about the scholarship numbers? He added 2 walk-ons to the scholarship numbers today. So clearly that's not top of mind for him. That's not a worry of his. You wouldn't think you'd go add walk-ons as scholarship players if you are worried about staying under that 85 number. So seems pretty clear Matt Rhule has a plan there. I think Matt Rhule knows exactly how many scholarships he has to work with, and he's going to use them. Good for Nate Borkacher and good for John Bullock getting on scholarship. Nate Borkacher is a guy that I've talked about, especially with my roommate. This guy was a walk-on redshirt freshman last season, and a conversation we had about 2 weeks ago on this show is if you have guys that are popping as freshmen or redshirt freshmen, those are guys that are going to develop into juniors and seniors being key contributors for your team and guys that could end up getting drafted one day. And Nate Borkacher, if he rises from walk-on to scholarship player to NFL draft pick, what a story that would be for a walk-on. It kind of goes with the history, the tradition of Nebraska. But Nate Borkacher is a guy that this staff clearly sees some future in. Something the last staff saw a future in, so good for him. And John Bullock's name we've been hearing all spring long as well. So good for those two guys being elevated from walk-on to scholarship players. I think that's always awesome, and I'm really hoping, crossing my fingers, one of my favorite things from this time of year is when the team media folks get together and make a video where the team gets surprised. Everyone learns who gets put on scholarship for any given year. Those are some of my favorite videos to watch from scholarship.
Those are memorable moments.
Football, the scholarship moments, and I'm really hoping that Nebraska was able to capture that on video and give the fans a glimpse into what it looked like at Nate Borkacher and John Bullock getting awarded scholarships.
No, Borkacher, really killer program at Aurora, and he was a big asset there. He's been available, but he's produced and he's performed, and big things can be expected of him. You look at that tight end room, And Borkacher's a name that we didn't discount, but it's not Fedoni. It's not Gilbert. Right?
Did you have him having the longest reception of the spring game?
No.
I don't think anybody did.
And I didn't have one of the other studs with 2 drops in the spring game. Mm-hmm. Time will tell with how things shake out for Gilbert with his eligibility. But, the kid's super talented and could be a great one here in Lincoln and beyond. But Borkacher just has done it every day. John Bullock is the player I really like and had seen him play at Creighton Prep. Him and his brother, they're just difference makers. And every time I didn't do a lot of prep games, but every time I would do a prep game, one of the Bullocks would be catching a touchdown or making a monster pick or stop on a third and whatever. And he has made the switch a lot like Nebraska did 30-plus years ago to get more speed and get after the quarterback, that 4-3 defense. Well, Bullock was that rover safety kind of nickel guy that they're moving up to linebacker. And his size at 6 foot, a little over 6 foot, 2 bills, he has got the athleticism and quickness and speed in the secondary, but he's got the tackling ability to be on that second level. And he's wowed, and you can't get enough compliments from head coach Matt Rhule about him. And it's really not a coincidence. We talk about a lot of programs around the state of Nebraska that do well. West Side's incredible. Bell West, phenomenal. I really love what Southwest and Southeast have done, not to discount the other programs in the city of Lincoln, either Pius and Lincoln High and North Star and Company, East for sure. So there's good talent in the metros. There's good talent in some of the rural parts of the state. Clearly, when you look at the recruiting that's going on in Hyannis. But Bullock's a guy that always made plays at the high school level. I thought Nebraska was really fortunate to get him as a walk-on, and now they're doing the right thing and getting a guy that's been a playmaker in the spring and through much of his career to be a difference maker at that linebacker spot, be another body when you look at with what Reimer and Henrich are expected to do.
Well, do you remember that game at Seacrest a couple years ago? It was Lincoln Southeast against Creighton Prep. Schmidt, I'm pretty sure you were on the call.
I did the game.
And the whole thought going into that game was A.J. Rollins. He's the guy who's going to Nebraska.
And he's
the
another prep guy that's killed it, and they switched positions with him.
And let's not discredit him at all. He had a fantastic game against Southeast as well, but the name that always stuck out to me, I was sitting here in the studio running the board for that one, running our breaks and studio hosting. John Bullock was a name you heard a ton, making plays all over that defense. It's good to see.
Couple of picks.
Yeah, another local kid getting a chance with Nebraska, getting a fresh set of eyes from the coaching staff and earning his way into a scholarship. That's just awesome news for a guy like John Bullock, who, as you said, I think Nebraska was lucky to get him as a walk-on a couple years ago.
We'll get to some recruiting thoughts in hour 2 with Nebraska, how it's 2024 shaping up. Husker Baseball, let's go there real quick. We'll continue on with it as we talk with Mike Babcock here in about 5 minutes. Husker Baseball got I guess we'll call it split, which was better than the alternative, losing all 3 to Creighton. They found a way, 7-4 in that second game. Max Anderson, big time, with that busted open moment with runners in scoring position. Nebraska responded. They held on. And Kyle Perry was instrumental. He let his voice be heard after they were unable to keep the lead in that game that was resumed, that second game. Nebraska losing 6-5. They came out and backed the words of Kyle Perry. He pitched really well and came in, really bullpen came in, and just one run in 8 innings. So that was impressive.
And don't forget the huge Brice Matthews jack to left field.
Yeah, that was a tone setter. That was big time for Brice to hit his 19th. The thing that was frustrating if you're a Nebraska fan in that resumption game is the fact you had bases loaded, no out, you get a sac fly, and then you hit into a double play. And boom, there goes your what could have been a big inning. And instead, Creighton's able to scratch and claw and win that 7th inning and beyond part of the affair, 6-5. But Nebraska, we'll see. We'll see if this is a spark. We talk about it over and over. I hate to go Groundhog Day on you with it, but maybe this means something as Penn State comes in. It's better than the alternative, and maybe it took a guy that's a 5th-year senior to finally say I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. You got to pick your spots with that. Lord knows that the Coach Bolton company, they've been wore out by the roller coaster that's been this 2023 season.
And we'll get some thoughts from Mike Babcock on last night's game, as well as Evan Bland coming up next hour, as both of them will give their thoughts on Husker baseball. But how about the baseball oddity? I'm not sure if I want to overstate it here and call it the baseball oddity of all baseball oddities, but how about Nebraska getting a triple play on the fielder's choice? Maybe could have considered it a single. I don't think it was officially in the scorebook, but Nebraska gets a triple play.
The bottom of the seventh, bases 2 on for Creighton. You step on third, you throw to second, you overthrow first, and then you hose the guy going from first to second.
Yeah, you get a triple play with outs at third, second, and then second again.
The mother of all Al Bundy triple plays.
That's got to be a rarity.
Right. And you had to have it. You needed it. And the spark was very real, and offense followed. So Nebraska able to get a win. A lot up in the air with this team. If they can carry it over, they are down to gotta do it time with sweeping Penn State, and then also taking as many as you can out of Purdue. And their hopes and wishes rely on it for any shot at getting to Omaha and then beyond Omaha. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. Numbers to dial up, 489-1240, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Mike Babcock joins us. Get his thoughts from Hail Varsity. Hail Varsity Radio continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Great to have you back in. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency. Chris at HailVarsity.com to get to your emails. 489-1240. Historian, author, Hall of Famer Mike Babcock joins us from Hail Varsity at MD Babs. On Twitter, can watch Babbers and me and Elijah here on the Hail Varsity stream, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, or Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. And Mike, have you ever seen a triple play?
No, I have not.
Okay.
You got to get out and check out the 12U baseball a little bit more. You see a fair number over there.
That's a technically that was a triple play. Is that right?
I don't know if you've been the official scorer more times than me, so I'm going to put it in your batter's box for this. But if you pull the double, but you overthrow, and you've got a continuation of that play from first to second as you throw down for the third out, is it, or is it kinda?
I heard the discussion on the radio. They said, well, it was one pitch. They got 3 outs. The thing is, the batter reached first base on a fielder's choice, right, and then got thrown out at second base. So I don't, in a strict definition of what a triple play would be, in my mind, that probably wouldn't be a triple play. But it's probably just a debate that I would lose. I mean, people probably say it's a triple play because it's a continuation. But again, the runner did reach first base on a fielder's choice. To me, a triple play would include getting the runner out at first base in that situation.
Yeah,
very
that
fair.
Would be a triple play.
I think to me that the difference is that he did not reach first base on a single. I think if he reaches first base on a single and then gets thrown out at second, that's a little bit different. But because it doesn't count as a base hit because it is a fielder's choice, I think you can still call it a triple play. But it's a baseball oddity for sure to have a triple play, as I said last segment. Runner thrown out at third and then 2 thrown out at second. That's an oddity.
Yeah, it is. It is an oddity. And again, though it was not a single, he did reach first base on a fielder's choice. That's the thing that I would point to. But triple play, that's fine. Bottom line is you got 3 outs in that situation, and you move forward. So it was a good thing. All things considered, I thought it was just part of what Nebraska was able to accomplish in that game after having an opportunity that looked like a 7th inning, bases loaded, nobody out, and you come away with one run there. But I think that happened for Creighton in the second game. Didn't Creighton have a bases loaded situation? Maybe there was one out when they had it, but I think Creighton had something similar to that. They only got one run out of situations like that. So those kind of things happen.
Mike, overall, let's spend a minute here, continue a minute here on baseball, and with Nebraska looking forward to Penn State this weekend. Can you put your finger on the why? The talent versus the record. Why has it been so difficult in your estimation this year for Nebraska to kind of get out of their own way?
I think it's the consistency on the mound, consistency of pitching. Because I think that Nebraska offensively has been pretty impressive, really, with the home run hitting of Max Anderson and Brice Matthews and Gabe Swanson, and the Huskers' ability to score runs. That Maryland thing was an aberration. I think you got to get used to playing on that field. That was a bandbox. It kind of reminded. They were talking about Pete Incaviglia on the
Inky would have hit 30. Inky would have hit 30 home runs last weekend.
Yeah. Oklahoma State's ballpark was kind of a bandbox too, but I don't know if it was like that thing in Maryland. Yeah, Pete would have had a field day there.
204 to the line. Kidding.
Once you get used to it, just swing and hit it in the air, and it's going to go. That's the thing. But no, that was frustrating because you won the second game, and the way you have to win, I guess they're 12-10, and then you get hammered in the third game. But the Huskers did come back after frustration in the continuation game against Creighton and won. Snapped a 5-game winning streak by Creighton in that series. I think that's a positive going into this weekend. And as you mentioned earlier, I think Nebraska needs to sweep that series against Penn State to be in a position to get into the Big Ten tournament. I think that's really important. And Penn State is 6-11, I think, in conference play. So you should have a shot there.
Mike, in your estimation, based on what you're seeing, and you've got to see a lot of Husker baseball through the years, is Nebraska struggling to field teams that are going to be regional bound and maybe even College World Series bound someday because of the fact that they're in the Big Ten? We've spoken a lot about how the fact that the Big Ten isn't a baseball conference, and despite that, Nebraska's had their struggles in the past couple of years, and they have good talent on this baseball team, but I don't think they have a complete roster, and I'm wondering if you think that's because Nebraska is struggling to bring in the kind of talent that's required to go be a regional or a super regional team based on the fact that they're playing in the Big Ten. Because you see them going and getting JUCO guys and guys from Canada a lot more than they had ever before in Nebraska baseball history, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah, and I think the upcoming recruiting class, I don't know if there's junior college players in that. That's maybe an area where you need to get that kind of situation. I think Nebraska being in the Big Ten, I don't think that necessarily hinders Nebraska if you get the right players. And I really thought this season was going to come together because of the talent that Nebraska has here, but the pitching just hasn't come through the way that I would have expected it. But I still think that Nebraska has the opportunity, and whether it's the Big Ten or not, being in that conference, I think they can still do that on a consistent basis. I think Will Bold is the guy that can get them to do it. But it's just been to me, it's been kind of an aberration what's happened this season. I thought Nebraska would be much more consistent, I guess is the word that I'm looking for here, because you see games where the Huskers come out and hit the ball, and you saw an opportunity for a relief pitcher last night. Perry comes in there and gives Nebraska 4 strong innings, little over 4 strong innings. I thought he did a really good job of stabilizing things for the Huskers. And, so you see those things, but then, here comes another game, and all of a sudden you don't see those things. You don't see that kind kind of performance, again, particularly on the mound.
Mike, going to go to some football here and get your thoughts. Brice Matthews is from the Houston region, not far from Will Bolt country, and Nebraska did a great job of grabbing Matthews and watching him develop into an incredible season this year. Turning it to football, Nebraska's going to be at Houston for a satellite camp with Coach Rhule, and we know about the Texas ties and the Texas pipeline. He wants to, open back up and really hammer Texas, and they have. But Broderick Thomas, one of your favorites, Houston product, just speak, if you can, to what it would mean for Nebraska to be able to pull some kids from that Houston region. It's not that Nebraska's gone shopping there that often. When they have, they've been hits.
Yeah, that's if you can make some connections down there, or you already have connections, which I believe Matt Rhule does. You don't even have to have the 5-star rated guys. You can get 4-star, 3-star. There's talent there that you don't have to get the absolute best guys. If you just get guys from that area, you're going to have an opportunity, I think, to be successful when you bring in guys like that. And you're right, Broderick is one of my all-time favorites, the Sandman, the master of disaster. He was I forget the guy's name, but there was a guy at Texas A&M. They were rivals, and Nebraska played Texas A&M in the
Kickoff Classic.
Kickoff Classic, yeah. There was a big matchup there. And of course, Broderick's
John Roper was the linebacker, wasn't he? Or
yeah. One of those there two? You go.
Mike Babcock's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, switching gears here before we get you out, I know we're up against a little bit of a break here, but I want to get your thoughts. Husker football, Casey Thompson going down to FAU, and don't think it's necessarily a surprise to see that Casey is not coming back with just the play time that he would get at FAU, but your reaction to that, and do you think FAU is going to have some fans in Nebraska next season?
Well, I think so. I wish him the best. I personally, I was surprised that he left, because I thought he would stick around and compete for that starting job with Jeff Sims. It was a situation where I think Nebraska was going to be, go into the season with 2 quarterbacks like that. And even if Casey didn't win the starting job, he's there. And if Jeff Sims gets hurt, here's Casey to step in, kind of like the comparison I make was Brooke Berringer and Tommy Fraser. In 1994, Tommy Fraser gets injured. Brooke Berringer is the backup. He comes in, he wins 7 games, wins the Big 8 championship, gets him into the Orange Bowl for a national championship opportunity. Then he comes back his senior year. There's competition in the fall camp. And Tommy emerges, and Brooke doesn't get to play that much. But he showed enough. He was talented enough that he would have been. Word was that he would be in the NFL draft. And then the sad part of that story, everybody knows that. But and so I was just surprised that Casey Thompson left. But I think he'll be very successful at Florida Atlantic. That's where he's going, right? And that's where Tom Herman is now coaching. And Tom Herman was his coach at Texas. And so there's a connection there. And, I think he'll be extremely successful there because he's played for the coach and he knows the coach's mindset, what kind of system he's likely to be in.
Pretty savvy choice, quite frankly, by Casey. Mike, we'll get caught up next week. Thanks for talking some ball with us, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
There he is, Mike Babcock with us, historian, author, Hall of Famer with Hail Varsity at MD Babs. Find him on Twitter. We'll get into some recruiting thoughts, maybe a little golf talk. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks to Mike Babcock. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Can find it on the Hurrdat Family Network or those platforms you like, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. All for you, the full show or the segments you want to hear and the full video stream, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Reminder to get buckled up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. The national news today on Bob Huggins when it comes to college basketball. $1 million salary reduction for his anti-gay slur. Huggins going to return to the sidelines next season in the wake of his anti-gay slur on a radio interview earlier this week. Huggy agreed to a $1 million salary reduction, a 3-game suspension, sensitivity training, and the suspension will take place during the Mountaineers' first 3 regular season games. His contract also amended from a multi-year agreement to a year-by-year pact. That'll begin May 10th, today, through the end of April 30th, 2024. So his salary goes from $4.2 million to $3.2 million. And there's also, I believe, a donation financially that'll have to go to Xavier University. Huggy came out immediately and apologized. There's a lot of eye rolls going on, apology or no apology, for some of the language he used and what he directed in that radio interview. And Huggy Bear, listen, I don't know folks who've played for him. I've never interviewed anyone who's played for him. I remember watching his career from Cincinnati to K-State, and then from K-State to West Virginia. And the guy's lucky to have a job. I hope he's sorry, truly sorry, not sorry because, oh no, the world's going to blow back on me here. I hope he's sorry because he was insensitive and said some pretty mean things. I hope he's not that way in his heart. I don't know how he is, but I know he is paid dearly. And it's not enough for people. He'll have to just honestly be better with how he treats and acts towards people.
Well, and this just seems like such a weak suspension to me. The fact that it's only 3 games and you're losing $1 million. Like
his AD's Gordon, either his president or AD. I think it's his president's Gordon Gee, kind of the wacko that used to be at Ohio State that was sit there and was blasting away on he was dishing big-time dirt, and then all of a sudden, he's no longer at Ohio State.
I mean, if you're willing to use a slur like that on a radio show of that substance, think about what you're saying off the air. And that's a slippery slope type argument to say, well, if he's willing to say it in a radio interview, what else is he going to say? But think about what happened to Tom Brenneman of the Cincinnati Reds whenever he used the exact same slur on a broadcast. He apologizes an inning later. Within 24 hours, he is fired. And later that year, he's working high school football games because no one wants to touch him with a 10-foot pole. And Bob Huggins, because he wins some basketball games, oh, sorry, you're going to get suspended for 3 games. And we're going to take $1 million away from your salary next season after you've already made millions of dollars in your coaching career. It just seems weak. It seems like them, that is West Virginia, trying to say, well, we're going to save our PR here, but we're not going to fire our successful basketball coach that wins us basketball games. That's just not something we're going to. It just seems weak.
Well, and I mean, and Huggy got blown out at Cincinnati for some off-field antics with choices he made getting behind the wheel. I'm not saying that hasn't happened, but that you shouldn't have been punished for that. People do make mistakes, and you need to move forward and forgive is kind of my take on things, because you can have a moment and be absolutely wrong, and you get caught up, and he got caught up. And if he's truly sorry, again, those actions, not just the monetary donations, but if he's really sorry and wants to educate himself and be a better person, he'll absolutely be more proactive with how he's involved with people.
And I'm with you in that people deserve second chances. In this case, I guess you'd call it a third chance. People make mistakes. I'm with you on that. But I also think your actions deserve to have consequences.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm not sure that this consequence is enough for A, the amount of people he offended with this comment, B, just with the reach a guy like Huggins has, being the head coach at West Virginia. It totally, to me, feels like a university saying, we're going to avoid the PR firestorm here. We're going to give him a suspension that's not going to really affect our season. It's not going to affect him all that much, but we can call it a consequence. That's what it feels like to me, and I'm a little disappointed.
Now, okay, so I'm with you on the number of games being low, But what about the $1 million hit? Is that satisfactory? I mean, you go from 4 point whatever it was to 3 and change, and you go from a multi-year guarantee to a year-to-year. That's going to and listen, you deserve the backlash here and the punishment. Agree with you there, but that's going to long-term screw West Virginia recruiting. And guess what? That's fair in this instance. He's already 69 years old, so he isn't long for this world because of his early interview. I don't know that he overcomes this. He may personally overcome it and be a better person, but from a professional standpoint, the plank is short, and he's about halfway out on the plank, walking the plank here.
But the way college sports works, you win some games, people will forget about it. And that's what I think West Virginia's banking on here. A guy like Bob Huggins, I looked it up while you were mentioning it, what the $1 million hit does. In his basketball career, he's accumulated an estimated net worth of $15 million, meaning he's earned more than that throughout his career. $1 million, you're still making $3 million next season. I think you'll be able to live just fine in West Virginia next season. I don't like it. I don't know. That's my personal take. I don't think that he's really facing any real consequences for his actions. I think what we're seeing here is public relations and work saying, we're going to give him a consequence.
A fourth of his salary, I will say, is heavy. To your point,
a fourth of his salary feels like a hell of a lot more if you're making $70,000 in a year than if you're making $4 million in a year.
No, you're right.
Giving some guy $3 million a year doesn't feel like much of a consequence.
The amount is very true there, but. He had Huggins meet with Guy on Tuesday, expressed contrition for the remarks. The decision came from the highest levels of the school, including Guy, the university administration, the school's board of trustees, and the athletic department. That interview is on 700 WLW in Cincinnati, where Huggy used to coach, discussed the incident with Xavier, their crosstown rival, and it went sideways, and issued an apology. He's been torched repeatedly on Twitter for this, and he still has a job. And Nick chimes in. There's a lot of Huggins and Archie Bunkers out there still, and there you go. And Huggy's paying for it financially. We'll see if he changes his attitude in commentary on folks. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240. You can email Chris at HaleVarsity.com. Evan Bland going to join us here shortly, get his take on Husker Baseball, some recruiting thoughts for Nebraska football, and, of course, Coach Rhule met the Chamber of Commerce today in Lincoln. The preacher got going, man. It was super impressive. Super impressive if you were there. I think 750 was the number there. Casey Thompson off to Florida Atlantic with Tom Herman. And 2 Huskers get on scholarship. We'll wind down hour 1 with Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, email bag next hour, and the college football dark horses. Who could be TCU 2.0? Some names that pop up. Nebraska not on the dark horse nor the TCU 2.0 list, but there are some schools that you'll see either on the road or come to Lincoln that will highlight. So a thought here when we talk a little bit about the NFL. And do you like what the NFL's doing next year? And that is they are going to not guarantee you a primetime game. If you're awful and your attendance is so-so, how many Thursday night games, if you're prime, did you get stuck with a team that has somebody that's either injured or there's no hope? The all hope of playoff football left after week 5.
Well,
lots.
Especially whenever it's a team with no hope after week 5 that is now playing 4 days after their last game.
Sure, because and there are teams that are going to get stuck twice on Thursday, and it's open. It's open season for all networks. Mm-hmm. You want to bid, baby? Go for it. We'll put you on, which I like because Monday Night Football's still gold for me. I love it. Sunday night's still the king when it comes to viewership. And you've got Buck and Aikman there that are really talented. You have Fox that is paid for their place, and of course the CBS back in the day. I can say that now with Nance and Romo. I mean, it's open season. I am not sentenced anymore to Kansas City or Denver football per se with CBS at noon or at 3 o'clock. Now you've got Mahomes and you've got Kansas City. That's awesome. They're going to be prime time in it. Don't know about your donkeys.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Don't know about your donkeys with Let's Ride behind center there. I hope they get better.
Well, if I hope they're stuck on Thursday Night Football all year long because I don't want to watch them.
Because you're all right.
Well, and that's my thing with Thursday Night Football.
That's where Jacksonville used to be exiled to till they got pretty good towards the end of the year.
That's the thing with Thursday Night Football is it feels like a good exile spot because I don't, for the most part, have the desire to watch Thursday Night Football. And I know there's people out there that will watch Thursday Night Football every single week because, you know what, it's NFL. NFL's king. I'm going to watch it. I still don't see the point of having games on Thursday night where you're going to compromise players. Players don't like playing on Thursday night. Fans don't like going out and watching games on Thursday night because most of them have work on Friday morning. I don't get the appeal of Thursday night. I still think you put a doubleheader on Monday night every single night. You put one East Coast team, one West Coast team. You can flip it between ESPN and Amazon Prime for all I care. I much prefer that idea. You're not getting the craziness of putting a game 4 days after these guys were just playing another game on Sunday.
The health and safety argument goes out the window. What I don't like the NFL invading Black Friday.
I hate that too.
Let me have my Black Friday college football doubleheader, all right, and stay away. You've got the rest of the calendar that you've owned. Monday night, Thursday night. Their Thursday night wiped away a lot of the college football Thursday nights because Thursday night used to be an awesome night for college football.
You still have Thanksgiving Day.
Yes, you have the triple header. People still watch, and I know Detroit's better, but people still watch Detroit. All those years they weren't compelling.
And they put a game on New Year's Eve again this year too, which now with the college football playoff, that's kind of here's all the bowl games that aren't the college football playoff. A lot of those have been going on the 31st now, and now you got NFL that night.
Yeah, just stay out of Black Friday, and for that matter, college football stay off of Friday, but no one cares what I think in the Big Ten. That's okay. Evan Bland, his thoughts. College football in Nebraska next.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald. Find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Can read him, omaha.com. Evan, well, a late one last night. Nebraska gets a split on the diamond, but could have been more as they resumed that second game.
Right. It was kind of a weird vibe last night. I mean, it's not every day you see a game resume after 3 weeks where you know who the starting pitcher is, you know who's up in a bases loaded, no out situation. I think the vibe of it over the 3 weeks has sort of grown to be like, okay, well, you know, Nebraska's probably going to score, and there's sort of was this assumption that they were going to win the game, and it didn't happen, right? They gave up a sac fly, or they get a sac fly to take the lead, but then they hit into a double play. Creighton takes the lead right away in the eighth on a few hits, and they lose. And obviously, you know, in line with what Nebraska's struggles have been in the midweek this year, just sort of add to that pile. But to their credit, they were able to bounce back in the game at 7. Kyle Perry was a guy, fifth-year pitcher, who sort of took the group into the bullpen, a players meeting, and just said, you know, we're sick of this. We're sick of losing. We're fed up with it. And at least for one night, he came out and had 4 1/3 strong relief innings. Nebraska scores enough runs against a whole number of Creighton pitchers, and they win the thing. So, you know, maybe it's a one-off. Maybe it doesn't mean anything in the big scheme of things, but then too, maybe it's one of those times where they kind of figure out what this team can be, and now's the time when you got to get hot. 2 weekends left, and that's all you're guaranteed at this point. So maybe that was it for Nebraska. We'll see how it goes. But for one night, and at least for that second game, they looked like they figured some things out.
KP's a guy that has seen it all, done it all, been there, and persevered. Personality-wise, is that out of character for him, or is that on brand for him to finally bubble over?
Oh, I think that's pretty well in line with who he is. Yeah, I mean, he has always been one of the more vocal, outspoken guys. You think back to the 21 season a couple years ago, he was out recovering from an elbow procedure, and the coaches still thought enough of him to bring him on road trips just for what he added intangibly to the sidelines, to the dugouts, and all that. So yeah, I mean, he's always been sort of one of the emotional leaders, one of the mouthpieces of the group. But you don't usually see him get maybe overly fiery in the way that he did the other night. I think that was notable. And as Will Bull said afterwards, it's one thing to go out and sort of, preach to your guys, but then it's another to back it up. And he comes in and sits down 13 of 15 Creighton hitters into the sixth and backed it up. So, sometimes it kind of, I think we can relate to this as parents, guys, where sometimes it's not the message that changes, it's where the message comes from that changes. And so maybe that was an example of that with Nebraska, where they heard what they've heard from coaches for a lot of the season, but it coming from one of their peers, maybe that unlocks something for them as they head into these last 2 weekends with Penn State and Purdue.
Evan, Brice Matthews added 2 home runs to his total last night, one coming in that game that finally got finalized, that made one more home run finalized, and then another in game 2 of that doubleheader of sorts, absolutely crushed one to left. And you tweeted a little bit about Brice Matthews last night and the special kind of season he's having. Last time Nebraska had a player drafted in the top 50 of the MLB draft was Jabba Chamberlain back in 2006, so it's been a while. I want to get your thoughts, not necessarily on where Brice Matthews ends up in the draft, but just what kind of special season we're seeing from Brice Matthews right now and what he could become. Yeah,
he is, and it's really been a breakout senior year for him, where last year he was hitting around 260. Now it's almost 390. So I think one explanation that I've heard from him is that he's just thinking less, and that maybe the pitch clock in college baseball has actually helped him a little bit, because he's just kind of gotten in the box and had to hit. There's really not a lot of time to overthink things. So that's been a part of it. But really, the thing that set him apart from a statistical point of view is the power and the speed, right? Like, you have guys that are going to hit for a few more home runs, and you'll have guys that'll steal a few more bases. But to have a 19-19 at this point in the year is really rare. In fact, there's only one other college baseball player right now in Division I who has both of those numbers. So he's the second member of that club this year. There were 4 of them last year, as I tweeted out last night. So yeah, it's a rare blend of skills that he has. I don't know if shortstop is maybe where he ends up at the next level. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the outfield. Maybe it's somewhere else. He can play anywhere on the field, but just the ascension that he's had this year with Nebraska has been really notable. And you think about his career path. I mean, he was somebody who was getting football scholarship offers out of high school. He was a very talented, accomplished quarterback in the Houston area. He could have gone to Rice on scholarship. He could have gone to a couple other places and had his college paid for. And instead, he chose his first love, which was baseball. And was able to come up to Nebraska with the connections he had with Will Bolt and that staff that had been at A&M previously. So really cool example of a guy who was, maybe not a headliner in that particular recruiting class a couple years ago, but has developed, has really, just been devoted to his craft. And it's shown up this year, and there's no doubt the season that he's had now puts him firmly in that top 5 round range to be drafted, and maybe a lot higher when things are all said and done.
Let's go to Max Anderson. Projections you're seeing from him with the upcoming draft.
I think the last thing I saw from MLB.com had him in a top 3 rounds or so. I think 90, right around 90th overall. And he's another guy who I'll be curious to see where he projects at the professional level, because he was a third baseman his previous 2 years at Nebraska, and now he moved over to second base. He still hasn't committed an error at that position this year, which is really impressive. And you think about the other fielders that Nebraska has out there they're awfully talented, and Anderson's the guy that, according to coaches who track it in practice, is the guy who's been the best and the most consistent with the glove. So you add that to his elite ability to put bat on ball, and it has the makings of a professional type athlete. But I think what's interesting about Max Anderson too is he doesn't necessarily look the part of a guy who could be a major league slugger, even though the numbers back that up, and the performance that he had in the Cape Cod League the last 2 years would back that up as well. So exactly where he ends up, to me, I think will be fascinating. But there's just no doubt when you're hitting over 400 with 2 weeks left in the regular season, you're in a special class with very few others. So, he's another guy who, you think back to his contributions as a freshman on that Big Ten championship team. He was ostensibly their best hitter last year, even though it was a down year for everyone in that lineup. And then he bounces back this year. And I think along with Matthews, absolutely is deserving of All-America considerations when it's all said and done. So I think both of those, when you combine what those two have done together, it's really made for a special season, and probably what you would call the best Triple Crown race that Nebraska baseball has ever seen in a single year.
Evan Bland with us, few minutes at Hail Varsity Radio at Evan Bland OWH on Twitter is where you find him. To Football We Go, and ESPN letting the world know that Casey Thompson is off to Florida Atlantic. There had been a past connection, of course, with Tom Herman, who recruited him to Texas. And now Casey Thompson is settling in Boca. Thoughts on the move? I know that it sounds like Houston and Holgerson looked at him. Indiana, which would have been interesting. Notre Dame also kicked the tires a bit. There was Auburn for sure. And also a chance to come back to Lincoln, it sounds like. So the move for Casey down to Florida Atlantic.
I think when you get to that point where Casey Thompson is, when he's going to be a sixth-year college football player, and you go into the portal when he did, there's just not a lot of time to turn it around. Like, you don't have a year to build relationships with coaches. And so in a lot of ways it makes sense. Like, he knew Tom Herman. He was recruited by him at Texas. They spent 3 years together with the Longhorns. And so if you're speed dating and you know one of the faces pretty well and you got along with that person pretty well, I think the chances are pretty good that you end up there. I think, a lot of the other factors that maybe come into play for other players were not quite what they were for Casey in terms of the NIL money, in terms of prestige, maybe of team, of conference. Like, Casey Thompson's he started in the Texas-Oklahoma games. He had played in big games for Nebraska last year. So he's not somebody who's necessarily looking for that next stage up. Like, he's played on that stage. And so I think it says a lot for his decision-making process that he went with someone he was comfortable with. He went to a place where he can probably put up better numbers or certainly equal numbers to wherever else he would have gone. And it's an offense that maybe, unlike Nebraska, would allow him to stay healthier because he isn't going to be asked to run very much. You look at that offensive line that FAU has, it's considered to be pretty good by a lot of talent evaluators, so that's a group that can protect him. And you think about Thompson's college career, he hurt the thumb at Texas in the middle of that 21 season, and then last year with Nebraska, of course, has the shoulder early in the year that affected him the whole way. So he's somebody who wants to stay healthy, put up numbers, enjoy a season. And what better place to do that than Boca Raton for a year, have a good time, and then see what happens after that. So I think in a lot of ways it makes sense for him, even if what he was looking for was different from what maybe a lot of guys in the portal were seeking.
Well, and I don't know how many kids are left over from the John Garrison era down at Florida Atlantic before he moved on, but there's a little bit of a Nebraska connection there too many years ago. But wherever Garrison's gone, there's been high-level offensive line play and development. But you nailed the point. Casey going a different route where maybe fit is most important, and comfort and and for sure health. And let's see if FAU can get back to double-digit wins. Casey, was a lot of fun to cover.
And being a guy who's already graduated, doesn't sound too bad to go spend your final college year in Boca Raton. You know what? Sounds like a good life.
I mean, he's working on his second master's. He made 6 figures in Nebraska. I think he has a future certainly in coaching if he wants it. I know previously, having talked to him last year for a feature, he wanted to open up like a sports performance center back where he's from in Oklahoma City. So he's got the world in front of him. But if you got 1 year left to play and you can go do it with an old coach in a beautiful climate, like it's not the worst thing in the world. So I think kudos to Casey for knowing what he wants and going after it.
Evan, before we get you out of here, a report today, Matt Rhule confirms that Nate Borkacher and John Bullock have been placed on scholarship, 2 former walk-ons that now have their schooling paid for. Your reaction based on the spring those guys had?
I think if there were 2 walk-ons that you were to pick that would go on scholarship, those would be the ones. Cool stories in their own right. Borkacher, an Aurora kid, and Bullock from Creighton Prep. Borkacher, I think, probably has been on Nebraska fans' radar a little bit longer. Even last year, I mean, Mark Whipple and Sean Beckton and even Scott Frost at times sung Borkacher's praises as a guy who was really sure-handed, a reliable inline tight end who could block consistently, and somebody who we probably would have seen more of had Travis Vokalek not been, who he was and what he was able to do. So that one doesn't surprise me much. I think Bullock is more of the more recent riser when you think about what he did this spring, how much he came up from Matt Rhule and other coaches for what he's done. He very well could be the next success story about the guy who changed positions under Matt Rhule's watch and went on to bigger and better things, moving from defensive back down to linebacker. So I think he's got sort of that versatile skill set that they're looking for in the Tony White defense, where you don't exactly know, hey, is this guy dropping back into pass coverage? Is he rushing the quarterback? What's he going to end up doing? So I think that all makes sense for him. It seems to me like his floor at this point, based on what we've heard, is special teams contributor and rotational member of the linebacker group, and maybe he could take the Luke Reimer path into being more of a starter after coming on as a walk-on from more humbler beginnings. So 2 cool stories. I think just the fact that Nebraska is finally below or at that 85-man scholarship limit is also newsworthy based on what Matt Rhule said today in Lincoln. So they're moving forward, and I think those 2 guys, if things continue to pan out, could be big success stories for what this staff can identify and what they can do even in the walk-on program.
Evan, from a recruiting standpoint, do you feel like Nebraska is doing all right momentum-wise for 2024?
Yeah, I think they're at that point where, it's got to start breaking one way or the other. I feel like every May I sort of think this, where you kind of start to think, man, okay, it's May, early signing period's 6 months away, and you kind of expect them to have like a dozen commits. And really, that's not been the trend. It's been kind of where they are, like half a dozen, 5, 6, 7 guys. And then this has become official visit season, right? 5 years ago, the major official visits would come in the fall during the games, and now they're coming in June, and Nebraska's going to have a big one here in late June with a number of official visitors coming in there. So I think, they've laid a lot of groundwork. You think about the spring game weekend and some of the other big recruiting events that they've had. They've had those guys on campus with the aim of earning official visits, and now those are coming up here in the next month or so. I think that's when you need to start seeing some of that fruit bearing out for those efforts. And if that doesn't happen, if you get toward the season and, your numbers are still right in that 6, 7, 8 range, maybe you can get a little bit worried, but I still think there's time for the work that they've done to turn into results here in the next couple months.
Evan, we'll talk again soon. Thanks for all the insight as always, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Chris at hailvarsity.com, 489-1240 to get in. Some roll call on the stream. A lot of good comments in today. Matt chimes in when we were talking about the Chamber of Commerce sit down today. 750 of Coach Rhule's closest friends of local business owners in Lincoln passing the hat, so to speak, or the collection plate what it could do for NIL and raising money for Nebraska football or athletics. Matt's brought it up before. Go to the tape. You did some quick math. $20 would bring in, what do you say, 2 point whatever million?
$2.5 million a month. If everyone who attended a Husker football game last year, that would also include people, under the age of 15 who probably don't have the money to spend. So I put the conservative number at 125,000, and I don't think you'd get that many people donating 25. But even if you get, 75,000, 60,000 people, we're still talking over $1 million a month and $15 million a year.
More roll call. This is from a goodie and an oldie. Don King says, "What's up?" from the grave.
That's going over my head. Can you explain?
Well, Don King is no longer with us. Don King was a boxing promoter and was alleged to have ripped off Mike Tyson.
Okay.
As well as do time for maybe taking someone's life, allegedly, for the mafia. Chris checks in. The wrong Chris. Chris Hansen.
It's the guy you don't usually want in your stream. You don't want.
I don't want to see him at all on any camera.
If you walk into any room and Chris
Hansen's going to jail.
Yeah.
You are going to jail. You are absolutely going to jail. Nick chimes in about Friday night football. I'd watch football every night. Agreed, but Fridays are for high schools. Amen. But thank you, Chris Hansen, for chiming in and making me laugh. I'm Chris Hansen.
It's a great YouTube name.
That's all
the classic Chris Hansen quote. Sit down, Schmitty. Take a seat.
So, right. Let's. You need to sit down right there. Let me run out the back. There's police waiting. Catch a predator. Wonderful. How about this? The money you get in the collection plate, you run over to the casino and put it on a college football dark horse for a monster payday, like, say a 200-1. TCU shocked the world. TCU had been kind of mired in 5-7 or 6-6 or 4-8. They'd fallen off from knocking on that playoff door. Gary Patterson run out. Here comes Coach Sonny Dykes, and you have Max Duggan. Incredible talent, gets loose. That TCU defense, fantastic. They get to the college football playoff. They beat Michigan with some help from Michigan, and then Georgia dismantles them worse than Nebraska dismantled Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. So CBS Sports has gone through some dark horse teams. They've excluded almost a top 20 of teams that are 50-1 odds or better. So Ohio State's better than 50-1. Notre Dame's better than 50-1. Oklahoma, coming off a 6-7 season, still better than 50-1. Teams that are on the cusp right there, but still a little bit too good odds to put heat on for a monster ROI. Penn State and Washington. I think you could see Washington make a real strong playoff push. Coach DeBoer's tremendous. Penix is really, really good. What does Baylor and Arkansas do, right? Because you had moments for each team, and then Baylor. The Big 12 was subtly very difficult last year. Super difficult to navigate through, and they started eating one another. So out of the ACC, how does this grab you? NC State, 250-1. Coach Doran might get NC State back in contention. Of course, you're going to have Virginia Tech. You're going to have Clemson first and foremost. North Carolina is supposed to be back. They had their misstep last year. You have NC State, they're blue collar. If you remember Doran after the North Carolina-NC State rivalry game. So they've got their quarterback back, and they look like a team that could finally stabilize and put a run together. Tim Beck, though, is gone. He is no longer there. You have Mr. Garrison. John Garrison is off to Ole Miss. That's no good. So you got some transition, and Beck was really good. He's now a head coach at Coastal. So Wisconsin, is it right? Is it Coastal? Yeah. Back to Covert Coastal.
Yes, that's true.
Wisconsin, 60-1. That's a lot of faith in Luke Fickell. They do have an offensive line. They're going to have a defense. They're going to have a run game with one of the best running backs in the country in Braylon Allen. And I don't think Fickell is going to force feed things with a spread attack. He'll lean on the ground. And you have Tanner Mordecai, a 6-year transfer quarterback, could be the magic for Wisconsin. They're right there neck and neck with Iowa as a West favorite. Texas Tech at 125-1. Joey McGuire's awesome. He's incredible. 8-5 last year. They did some things that they haven't done in a while, and that's take down some teams. I do believe it was Oklahoma and Texas in the same season last year. So McGuire's got things going, and I think it's just a matter of when, not if, he gets plucked by a bigger program. If I'm Texas and things don't go better for Sark, I'd go get Joey McGuire. I think he's that good a coach. Oregon State, 50-1. Oregon State was really nice. Trent Bray, you might remember the name, here in Lincoln. They've done well. They ranked 105th nationally with fewer than 200 passing yards, but Oregon State was tough. They had a good defense. They got Jonathan Smith and that motion offense going. Ugalele, the quarterback that was really good against Notre Dame one night and then had a bad year for Clemson last year. He has transferred to Oregon State. Auburn, Hugh Freeze, Auburn, Peyton Thorne, and a bunch of speed and toughness on defense. Auburn's been the king of dark horse teams. They've been great. Beyond Cam Newton, Auburn has been flat out wow. They kind of come out of nowhere. They fall off. They make another coaching change by the boosters. And here comes Hugh Freeze, and he did it at Ole Miss. And whatever he was doing at Ole Miss or accused of doing at Ole Miss when it comes to improprieties with players, there's always smoke around Ole Miss, and then they eventually got popped for probation. They can do it now. NIL's legal.
Schmidt, tell me, with those teams you list out, I think that's all Power 5 conferences you've just gone through. Is this to make the college football playoff, or is this to win the college football playoff? The odds.
I think they're the odds.
The odds to make it?
Dark horse contenders for the playoff, to be one of the four.
Okay, my advice, save your money on all those schools.
I think you load up on Auburn.
No.
What the hell?
No.
No?
No. And here's why.
Because it's Auburn?
When you look back,
Freeze?
Since the college football playoff came about in 2014, guess how many teams that began the year outside of the top 15 made the college football playoff, Schmitty?
The team that came out of nowhere to win it was Oklahoma, and then there's TCU last year.
Yep. And for what it's worth, TCU is the only team to begin the season outside the top 15 and make the college football playoff. The closest we got was in 2016. Washington began the year ranked 15th in the AP poll.
So 14th in the AP poll. They just snuck in.
Yes. So if you're looking at that, if it's a team outside the top 15 in terms of odds or in terms of the AP poll, save your money. History would tell you they're not going to make the college football playoff. Now, with that being said, the difference between college football now and what it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Juice your roster.
NIL
overnight.
and the transfer portal has changed some things. Like USC last year was close to making a college football playoff. I think they're beginning the year 6th in the preseason poll, according to ESPN. I know the AP poll's not out just yet, so USC is a team I'd look at, but save your money. Like I don't think you're going to get a team that's going to catch lightning in a bottle like TCU did last year outside the top 15 again back-to-back seasons. Now, could I be wrong with the influence of the transfer portal? Sure, but history would tell you with a 4-team college football playoff, you're going to be looking at teams that are starting the year in the top 15.
Sparty was close with Mel Tucker going 11-2. They had a bad day against Purdue. The Buffs and Coach Prime are 200-1.
Save your money there, folks. And apparently they're getting a lot of juice in Vegas, a lot of money going down on the Buffs.
Iowa State at 200-1. University of Texas San Antonio 500-1. So those are some uber long shots. But man, that payday'd be nice. I am searching and I don't have Nebraska's odds yet. I would assume Nebraska's odds right now, if Wisconsin's 60-1, and Wisconsin's win total per DraftKings is right now at 7.5. Nebraska's at 6. I'd say Nebraska's probably in that 150 to 1. That sounds about right, based on being a 6-win over-under projected football team.
And Nebraska always gets a little bit of juice in Vegas because of the appeal of Nebraska.
People want it to happen.
But I mean, I'm just looking at, whenever I'm looking at dark horse teams, I'm going to look at those teams in the 15 to 10 range in the preseason top 25. And I know the AP top 25 hasn't come out yet, but ESPN has released their projections for what the preseason top 25 is going to be. In that 15 to 10 range, you look at Utah, Florida State, Oregon, Tennessee, Oklahoma's at 11th, then Penn State in 10th. Those are the teams I'd look at in terms of having some value to make a college football playoff, in terms of it's attainable and you're going to get better value than with the Ohio States and Clemsons and Alabamas.
I overreacted way too much to Oklahoma v. Nebraska last year. Mm-hmm. And then they got trashed by Adrian and K-State. And then Oklahoma was just a joke. They were just a flat-out joke. Them coming in at 11, sorry. Venables is a good defensive guy. I don't know that he's a head coach material. He may not last long in Norman.
Well, get this. Texas comes in at number 5, which I can see based on what you saw from yours.
Early love on them and USC.
Yeah, I like USC. I think USC is a college football playoff team.
Still got to play Utah, baby.
I still think they're a college football playoff team. I think year 2 of Lincoln Riley, you get the Heisman winning trophy and Caleb Williams back. I think USC is in the college football playoff.
Who's playing defense? Does the Grinch fix their defense yet? Are they going to be able to score 50 if you score 35 on them? You think they're going to be that good offensively to just outscore?
Yes, I do.
All right.
I think it's Lincoln Riley. I think that's what he did for the most part at Oklahoma. I think he's going to continue to do that at USC, and especially in the Pac-12.
Then he's going to get to move to the Big Ten, where it snows in November, and there's sideway wind at 30 miles per hour, and you better get a run game. Nick says, bet Nebraska.
I don't know about that.
We'll Jock Doc it here. Facial fractions, no good for a Royals hurler. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. It's time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here. Dr. Brandon, how we doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We are good. We're a lot better than Ryan Yarbrough from the Kansas City Royals. The lefty pitcher got tagged, and it wasn't for extra bases or beyond the fence. It was to the tune of a facial fracture times 3. Dr. Brandon, how often do you or have you had to mess with these in your career?
Yeah, fortunately, Chris, not very often. It's a pretty rare injury here. It is interesting that, these don't happen more often, especially when you think about in baseball and softball. And a number of times that you do see some contact, at least with the helmet or in that vicinity where he had his. But as you look at this, obviously the first kind of headline that pops out there talks about, head fractures. But essentially what this is, it's a facial fracture. And it sounds like, as they're kind of describing this to us in the media, it's more of kind of what we call an orbital fracture. So basically kind of the eye socket, if you will. There's bones that obviously surround the eye to protect it. That's called basically the orbit, and it sounds like he has kind of 3 areas there where there's a fracture that's present. Just to be clear, we talked about this before. In our world, we mainly use the term fracture, but fracture, broken bone essentially mean the same thing. For us, the big thing is, one, is it a fracture that's displaced, or is it kind of sitting in a position that's essentially non-displaced, minimally displaced? That's the first thing. Second thing is whether or not it's open or not, whether there's maybe a cut over the area is kind of the other part of it that kind of changes the game a little bit in terms of treatment.
Dr. Brandon, how serious is an injury like this? And I know he's going to be on the disabled list for a little bit here as he recovers, but this is typically an injury you think of when you think of boxers and MMA fighters, that you're going to take a punch to the face and boom, you have a broken orbital. Some of those guys are even able to fight through that injury. So what is the prognosis for a baseball player like this in terms of seriousness of this injury?
Yeah, so the biggest thing with these is obviously the bony part, the bony reconstruction part. It's really not the huge issue. It sounds like in this scenario they're going to treat this non-operatively. I have not seen any new info to conflict that, but obviously if it is displaced, they would have thought about doing some type of surgical intervention where they have to put some little tiny plates in there to realign the bones, and that's a pretty easy thing to fix. The biggest part with this is really the trauma that happens to the eye. So the eye itself is really what you worry about here. You can have some damage where you can have some tensioning on the nerve that attaches to the back of the eye, the optic nerve. Obviously, you can have some blunt force trauma to just the eye itself. And that's really what you worry about long term. So you worry about, obviously, your vision, how's the movements of your eye, how's the tracking, all that kind of stuff. And that'd be the thing that really is going to determine how he does long term. Purely if this is just a fracture and there's really no damage, long-term sequelae to the eyeball itself, then he'll return really well, and really shouldn't be any long-term ramifications from it from that perspective.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Ryan Yarbrough of the Royals, orbital non-displaced fracture 3, as he took one off the face against Oakland on Sunday. How about the PTSD, Dr. Brandon, of climbing the hill again and letting another one go? And you're throwing a pitch inside, you're throwing a pitch that stays over the plate, and we all watch baseball. You've got guys that are so good at timing it up and really giving it the full force to hit a liner back at you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris, and that really is something you do worry about. So you can imagine, obviously, standing on that hill and having that kind of velocity come at you, and then obviously having this traumatic part occur. So, that'll be a big battle for him. It will take him some time to kind of overcome that, and that really is the question. Can he overcome it? Will the trauma from this, be too much where he really doesn't feel confident back out there? I think in time there will be a good, potential for him to come back from this and feel confident at some point. This would be one of those scenarios where, some kind of desensitization type of biofeedback, behavioral kind of modification therapy would be appropriate. The biofeedback in these scenario can be pretty helpful. But that's really going to be, honestly, his biggest battle getting back is just the fear of not being hit again. There's really not a great device you could put on that would allow him to, go out there and throw and not have kind of an obstruction to his eyesight. Obviously glasses, that kind of thing, but even still, that's not probably enough to provide that much adequate protection.
Dr. Brennan, how bad could this have been? I want you to put on your ER doctor cap for a second, if you don't mind. If you heard you were getting a patient coming in that got hit in the head by a 106-mile-per-hour line drive, and then you do some evaluation and see it's just a broken orbital, what would you say in terms of best-case scenario, worst-case scenario? Where does this fall on that sliding scale of how bad it could have been?
Yeah, definitely way up there. So we really worry about these. Anytime you have blunt force trauma near the eyeball itself, that definitely gets the radar up. And so you're thinking about making sure they get all the appropriate imaging. You want to make sure that person gets there quickly so you can get that going. Because the biggest thing is, if there is some orbital or some eyeball or orbital trauma, you want to make sure that there's not some type of deformity in that bone that's going to continue to push either A, on the eyeball itself, or perhaps even the surrounding support structures, such as like the optic nerve coming in the back of the eye. And so the sooner you can get to that and take that pressure off, that's really important. Taking the pressure off the nerve, taking the pressure off those vital structures within the eyeball. And so these are definitely a fast, emergent kind of injury that you want to take care of right away, or at least diagnose right away to figure out the severity, so you can figure out a pretty quick treatment plan.
Dr. Brandon,
really
in terms of long-term care here, assuming there isn't significant damage to the eyeball itself, what is the long-term prognosis for a broken orbital? Because you see this so many times in boxing, and they're able to come back. MMA, the same guys are able to come back. And now we get to see it in baseball. What is the long-term prognosis of an injury like this? Is there long-term risks that come with breaking an orbital? I can't even say the word. An orbital in your sports playing career?
Yeah. Honestly, if there's not any real significant damage to the eyeball itself, then I would say prognosis is very high for him to get back and play at a very high level. Obviously complications down the road, you worry about, again, anything with the eyeball where it changes your ability to track, focus, the vision itself is a big deal. If this turns out to where maybe it ends up developing some scar tissue, that potentially could impact a little bit of his vision, especially peripherally. That could potentially impact a little bit of the kind of tracking mechanism. That may change that. So that could be one of those things that's a low complication, but it is a risk. The other thing you worry about, too, just in the scenarios, you think about the blunt force trauma, he probably has a concussion, I would assume, on top of this in order to have that much impact and force go through that area. He probably has a concussion. Then you start even going down that pathway. Could this develop into one of those kind of chronic concussion scenarios where he never quite gets that balance or focus back is also a possibility.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Ryan Yarbrough, lefty for the Royals, and that 3 non-displaced orbital fracture around his right eye. Dr. Brandon, we'll talk next week. Thanks for giving us a few minutes today.
Okay, fellas. Take care. Thanks.
All right. Good stuff from Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Good to hear from him. Good to get some thoughts as we wind down a Wednesday. Busy show. Good stuff from Evan Bland, Dr. Brandon, and Mike Babcock. Loaded up tomorrow. A couple of maybes and a couple of reservations. We'll let you know about it. Steak and a beer may be on the docket for tonight. Are you game?
I'm always game.
All right. We will get a steak and a beer bet going next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time tomorrow on the show, we are going to try and run down Charles Thompson, Proud Papa Casey Thompson, Brandon Vogel going to join us from Hail Varsity, Gary Barnett, and maybe another surprise. We'll leave it lay there. Can find the show. Always download the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity, the full show or the segments you want to get caught up on, the full video portion at the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. It's where the weekend edition airs, and the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. Follow that. Give us a follow as well at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel, and at HVarsity Radio is the radio feed. Can watch the video there and get caught up with Damon and Andrew in the morning and us in the afternoon. How are you feeling here with the Lakers?
Good. I'm glad you didn't ask me about the Nuggets because I'm not opening my big fat mouth in this radio show again about the Nuggets until they either get it done or they're... Can we wait till after the Game 6? Can we talk about them on Friday? Because I clearly cursed them over the weekend. I don't want to talk about the Nuggets anymore.
Fine.
I don't feel good about them. I don't feel bad about them. I don't know they exist. As for the Lakers, they have taken a commanding 3-1 series lead, as we all know. But how I am feeling is that Steph and the Warriors are championship caliber for a reason. They have been there. They've done that. I think their backs are going to be up against the wall. I think they at least get it done tonight. I'm not saying they win the series. I do think the Warriors get it done tonight, though.
They are favored by 8. They are favored by 8. You look at what happened in that tight ball game where free throws matter, and the Lakers were plus 11. Not just makes, but getting to the line. Only 12 free throw attempts in total for Golden State. I know they're a jump shooting team with the Splash Bros. That said, you got to put up more of a fight getting to the rim. Plus 7 off turnovers. Pretty close when it comes to turnovers, but the Lakers capitalized more. How does Golden State respond? Their window, by all accounts, is closing rapidly, not just from an age, but from a camaraderie standpoint. It's been a rocky year from the get-go. And Klay Thompson took just a garbage shot. And it's one thing to do that in the first quarter. It's another thing to do it in crunch time when momentum's hanging on an answer offensively. And the Lakers had a lot of energy used to put a 10-0 run together to take the lead. And then Golden State responded. And then the fourth quarter happened where somebody came off the milk carton and went for 15 points, which is unheard of. That doesn't happen again tonight. I think Golden State toughens up. I don't know that they cover the 8. I think it's still going to be dicey. I still think there's a little bit of drama and tension with Golden State, knowing that this could be it. Home court's the difference. I think the Lakers cover, but I think Golden State wins it. I'm with you. That's not incredible insight. Is there anything you want to stake in a beer on this thing?
I'll take the Warriors. 7.5 is where I'm seeing the line. Are you seeing 8?
I'm seeing 8.
Can we do 7.5?
Sure.
I'll take the Warriors to cover 7.5.
Okay. I'll take the Lakers and the touchdown and the hook.
I'll go Warriors 118 and Lakers 108.
Ribeye, New York Strip. I get a pick, right?
Well, if you win, it's a big if.
Talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks for spending time with Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.